Mercedes-Benz is one of the oldest and most luxurious car companies in the world, with a net worth of approximately $92 billion. It all began with the dream of a poor engineer who struggled greatly to create the world's first horseless carriage. Despite his struggles, he transformed his small venture into the world's first and largest car production company by the end of the 19th century. However, while this is an inspiring success story on one hand, it also has a dark side. When the company forcibly made workers produce military vehicles for the Nazis to earn profits, get ready to learn about the fascinating story of Mercedes-Benz and the man behind it, who is responsible for the birth of today's automobiles. Karl Benz was born in 1844 in a small town in Germany called Mollberg. He belonged to a middle-class family. His father was a locomotive driver who could barely make ends meet for his family. But when Karl was just 2 years old, his father passed away, which led Karl and his mother to face financial struggles. Karl Benz's childhood was far from easy, living in poverty and sleeping on an empty stomach. Despite all this, his mother made every effort to ensure her son received a good education. It was because of this dedication that Karl could attend school, and at a young age, his brilliance in subjects like chemistry and mechanics became evident. When he turned 15, he decided to follow in his father's footsteps and take the entrance exam for mechanical engineering at the University of Karlsruhe. There, he met a teacher named Ferdinand Rettenbacher, who had a significant impact on Karl's life. Rettenbacher is considered the man in Germany who transformed mechanical engineering from merely a workshop-based skill into a proper technical science. Rettenbacher believed that the steam engines used in railways and boats at that time were becoming outdated, and it was time to think of something new. Influenced by his teachings, Karl's interest in creating a horseless carriage grew even stronger. He began experimenting on his bicycle to figure out how he could build a motorized vehicle. Some people had already created self-propelled vehicles, but these inventions were not practical. Karl observed that most of these vehicles were based on steam engine technology. However, under Professor Rettenbacher's guidance, he realized that a completely different and new approach was needed to create motorized carriages. When Karl Benz presented his vision to others, many laughed at him. People thought it was impossible, but Karl was firmly convinced that it was possible. He just needed a little more time to prove it. So, when he turned 19 and graduated from the University of Karlsruhe, he spent the next 7 years working in various engineering and construction jobs. Although he couldn't properly fit into any job, he learned something new from each one, which he later implemented when starting his own venture. In 1871, at just 27 years old, Karl partnered with a mechanic named August Ritter and started an iron foundry and mechanical workshop in Mannheim. At that time, Karl was also working on a side project to build a motorized carriage. However, running the business required another partner, so Karl partnered with Ritter. Unfortunately, Ritter turned out to be an unreliable partner. When local authorities seized their tools, the business began to struggle in its very first year. But during this time, another important person entered Karl's life, Bertha Ringer. At that time, she was his fiancée, and later they got married. Bertha came from a wealthy family but was a genius and very strong-minded. She couldn't tolerate that Karl's hard work was being wasted due to his unreliable business partner. So, she used her own dowry to buy out Ritter's entire share, giving Karl and Bertha full control of the business. Together, they managed the business and kept the company afloat during tough times for the next 10 years. Despite all these struggles, it was during this phase that Karl Benz showcased his true talent. In his side experiments, he made some major inventions, the most notable being the gasoline two-stroke engine built in 1879. To earn money, he also started patenting his inventions, which included major innovations like the clutch, engine speed regulation system, battery ignition system, water radiator, carburetor, and gear shift. With these inventions, Karl was not only getting closer to fulfilling his dream of a horseless carriage, but also helping grow his business by selling these components. However, the problem was that the business wasn't doing as well as Karl had hoped. Production costs had risen so much that banks demanded the company be incorporated. As a result, Karl had to partner with other investors, and in 1882, his business became a joint stock company. In the end, Karl was left with only 5% of the shares, and his position was downgraded. Worst of all, his ideas were no longer taken seriously. When the company designed new products, not only was Carl's opinion ignored, but no one even listened to him. Frustrated by these arrangements, Carl left the company the following year. Leaving the business he had built was not easy for him. But this disappointment ignited an even stronger determination within him. His long-standing passion for bicycles led him to Max Rose and Friedrich Wilhelm, who ran a bicycle repair shop in Mannheim. Carl Benz, along with Max Rose and Friedrich Wilhelm, founded Benz, which focused on building industrial machines and stationary gas engines. Compared to his previous venture, this business did quite well and became profitable in a short time. With a regular income and a team of 25 people, Carl finally had the financial stability to focus entirely on his lifelong dream of building a vehicle powered by a gas engine. However, Carl didn't just add a motor to a regular carriage. He designed the entire vehicle around the motor. Using bicycle-like mechanics, he created a machine that is still considered the world's first true automobile. This was the Benz patent motor wagon, built in 1885. It was a two-seater vehicle, essentially a kind of tricycle, equipped with a gasoline-powered four-stroke engine. Its single cylinder generated roughly 2-3 horsepower, with a top speed of about 7 miles per hour. Carl knew he had created something revolutionary. After testing, he introduced his wonder car to the public in 1886. However, when it was driven on public roads, some people praised his invention, but most were confused. They feared this strange machine might explode, and for this reason, many banned it from being driven on main roads. Some were so frightened by Carl Benz's invention that they thought he was some kind of devil driving a ghostly vehicle. Not only the general public, but also Carl's business partners were unhappy with this. They felt Carl's obsession with automobiles was distracting him from his real work. They argued, who would buy such a machine? It's not faster than a horse, it could break down anytime, and the fuel could run out anywhere. Despite all this, Carl Benz firmly believed that his horseless carriage was the future, and with this belief, he began car production in 1888, becoming the first person in the world to start producing commercial cars. His biggest supporter was his wife, Bertha Benz. She often worked with him in the workshop and offered new suggestions. But despite all these improvements, people still couldn't understand Carl's vision. The few who bought the car used it only for short-distance travel, and even then, only with a mechanic present because anything could happen at any time. Additionally, another major problem was that these cars were very expensive, affordable only to the wealthy. But even rich people didn't like them because they were noisy, messy, and seemed unreliable. Despite all this, one thing was clear. Carl had to show the world that the automobile was not a joke, but the future. And then, in the summer of 1888, one morning while Carl was still asleep, Bertha Benz quietly got up, took her husband's car, and set off on a historic road trip that is still considered a turning point in automobile history. Bertha took her 2 sons along and set out to visit her mother in Pforzheim, which was 66 miles away from Mannheim. The most interesting thing was that she didn't tell her husband or anyone else because if anyone found out, they would have stopped her. Until that time, no motorized carriage had traveled such a long distance. But Bertha was fully prepared to show the world that Benz's invention was not just a toy, but the future. However, this trip was far from easy. The roads were unpaved, rocky, and built only for horses. She had to buy fuel from a pharmacy because petrol pumps didn't exist back then. And she also faced some mechanical problems, which she fixed herself. It took her over 12 hours to cover the 66-mile journey. But in the end, Bertha and her 2 sons reached Pforzheim safely. Most importantly, Bertha achieved what she had set out to do. She gained people's attention, and they saw that the automobile actually worked and was practical. After this trip, the Benz patent motor wagon became popular throughout the town. The publicity was so tremendous that Benz-Sie's business started growing rapidly. By 1890, Benz-Sie had become Germany's second-largest engine manufacturing company. This success came from selling stationary gasoline engines, not cars. But as soon as Friedrich von Fischer and Julius Ganz joined the company as business partners, things slowly started to change. They mainly handled the business and marketing side, allowing Carl Benz to focus entirely on engineering. With this new support system, Carl patented several new car innovations, such as the planetary gear transmission, double pivot steering, and a flat engine with a boxer configuration. On his partner's suggestion, Carl designed a new and improved car, which was launched in 1893, named the Benz Victoria. This car was slightly more luxurious, built for 2 people, and had a 3-horsepower engine capable of reaching speeds up to 11 miles per hour. Due to its reliability, this car achieved decent sales. But its next version, the Velo, caused a sensation upon hitting the market as a cheaper model. A total of 1,200 units were produced, making it the world's first large-scale production car. However, while Benz's company was enjoying its success, another company was also rapidly growing, named Daimler Motorengesellschaft, which wasn't far behind in terms of success. Daimler Motorengesellschaft was led by Gottlieb Daimler and Wilhelm Maybach, both brilliant engineers. But Daimler was especially known for his competitive nature, business obsession, and industry connections, qualities that Carl Benz slightly lacked. Daimler's first commercial car was launched in 1892. Just 2 years later, they launched a 2-cylinder car, and in 1897, their first front-engine model, the Daimler Phoenix, hit the market. The public found Daimler's cars more modern, stylish, and comfortable, and it was clear that Daimler was overtaking Benz in the market. Unfortunately, Gottlieb Daimler passed away in 1900, and the company's command passed to Maybach. But this was the moment when Maybach designed his most iconic creation in 1901, the Mercedes 35 horsepower. This car was special because it resembled modern cars of today. It had a powerful gasoline engine, a wider and larger body, a tailored steel chassis, and most importantly, its center of gravity was close to the ground, making it super stable. Originally, this car was built for racing purposes, and the idea came from a wealthy businessman, Emil Jelinek, who suggested the car be named after his daughter, Mercedes. This car won multiple street race events, and its top speed of 56 miles per hour was higher than any other car at the time. Daimler then rebranded all their cars under the Mercedes brand name and began producing new models for both racing and public use. On the other hand, Benz's company partners went into a bit of a panic mode. They felt Benz needed to do something big, or Daimler would completely overtake them. To counter the competition, Benz's company brought in some French designers to their team to create a new and faster model. However, Carl Benz had no approval for this decision. He was very angry and upset about it. He never liked the idea of racing. He always wanted to build slow and safe automobiles. He absolutely hated the sound of high-speed racing cars because he didn't think it was right to drive so fast on public roads. The car built by Benz's team was also not successful, and this was a major setback for the company, causing financial struggles between 1903 and 1904. Carl decided to leave the company, but wanted to remain on the board of directors. However, he eventually allowed his cars to participate in racing, and this racing success was what would revive his company. By 1908, Benz built an HP racer that traveled from Leningrad to Moscow in 8.5 hours at an average speed of 50 miles per hour, which was an incredible record in itself, especially since the tracks were not in great condition. But the biggest breakthrough was the Blitzen Benz, built in 1909. This car produced 200 horsepower and broke a speed record in 1911, surpassing any plane, train, or automobile record of that time. With a capability to reach up to 140 miles per hour, it brought the Benz brand into the global spotlight. Now both Benz and Daimler's cars had become the most desired cars in the world, and both saw good sales. However, this success didn't last long. World War I began, and after that, the world's economy and people's lives were about to change drastically. To strengthen their chances of survival, both companies set aside their rivalry and signed an agreement in 1924. According to this agreement, both companies combined their production and marketing efforts, but retained their individual names to save costs. However, this agreement only lasted for 2 years because Germany's economy continued to decline, and both companies had to fully merge in 1926. As a result, Daimler-Benz emerged as a new enterprise. Under Daimler-Benz, the company began rebranding its cars as Mercedes-Benz. In the 1920s, they launched some impressive models like the Mercedes-Benz Type 630 and SSSK. These models were developed with significant contributions from a brilliant engineer, Ferdinand Porsche, who would later become very famous in the car industry. A few years later, in April 1929, Carl Benz passed away at the age of 84. After his death, the company continued its growth and kept producing some of the best performance cars in the world. However, Mercedes-Benz saw its best years under another leader, Adolf Hitler. When Hitler came to power in Germany in 1933, he made a plan to showcase German engineers and technology to the world to demonstrate his political power over other leaders. He decided that one way to impress the world was to involve German cars in international motorsports. Soon, he made a significant decision to involve Daimler-Benz in Grand Prix races. The time and money Daimler-Benz invested in racing technology and innovation paid off in the Grand Prix races. From 1934 to 1939, Mercedes dominated the Grand Prix races, and their W25 and W125 models achieved speeds of up to 200 miles per hour. However, during this time, a new rival emerged. Auto Union, another German automaker sponsored by their country. Auto Union also saw significant success during this period, winning 25 races between 1935 and 1937. This success brought Germany to the forefront of motorsport events, especially Mercedes-Benz, which had become Hitler's preferred car brand at the time. In fact, the car he frequently used was the Mercedes-Benz 770, a luxury vehicle mainly used by high-ranking Nazi politicians and Axis officials. But after the start of World War II in 1939, Daimler-Benz faced serious trouble. As the demand for civilian passenger cars drastically decreased, Daimler-Benz began producing military vehicles, submarines, tanks, and aircraft engines for the Nazi military. Their largest business line was military trucks capable of transporting supplies ranging from 3 to 6.5 tons. By 1942, Daimler-Benz stopped producing public cars, and all their resources were dedicated to the war effort. As the war escalated, they needed new staff to handle production because their entire workforce had started fighting on the front lines. Daimler-Benz began recruiting women to increase production, but this wasn't enough, so the company resorted to forced labor. Prisoners, civilians, and detainees from concentration camps were kept near factories and forced to work for hours. Most workers were from Eastern Europe and were kept in barrack camps where their living conditions were like those of prisoners. Those from concentration camps were held under the SS, where they were treated in extremely inhumane conditions. Many died in these camps due to malnutrition, mistreatment, or torture. By 1944, half of Daimler-Benz's 63,000 employees were forced laborers. When the war ended in 1945, the company faced a major setback. Due to the forced disarmament agreement, all German assets abroad were seized and used for reparations. As a result, Daimler-Benz lost all its foreign subsidiaries, affiliates, and branches, meaning they had to rebuild everything from scratch. Daimler-Benz was restructured, and they had to denazify their top management. By 1947, the company started producing passenger vehicles again, but that year, they only produced 1,445 units of the 170V model. Despite these challenging circumstances, Daimler-Benz began making profits just a year later. With a strong comeback in motorsport events in the 1950s, Mercedes-Benz regained its influence, and worldwide sales started to increase. By 1954, the company had earned over $1 billion in profits. Over time, Mercedes-Benz completely transformed its image and became one of the most valuable car brands in the world. But all of this was possible because of Carl Benz, who turned his dream into reality despite a childhood filled with poverty, betrayal by business partners, and criticism from others. If you found the story of Mercedes-Benz even slightly interesting, please give a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll meet you in the next video. Until then, you can watch another inspiring story of a luxury brand.